नमस्कार, स्वागत है फिर से आपका on the show alternate view. I'm your host, your friend, your fellow cricket tragic like so many of us are, Jamie Alter, and the man here on the below of your lock screens, Nishad Pai Vaidya, sports journalist, sports anchor, like me, a cricket tragic. I've read his work for many years now. We overlap briefly also at Cricket Country. Nishad, thank you for taking off time to come on the show. How's your day been so far?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I was really looking forward to this on this landmark day, actually, that, and can't believe it's been 20 years. Day, well, just looking outside, it's little gloomy, it's rainy, just I think the way it was even 20 years ago. And, we'll be talking about that. But yeah, I mean, it's been really rainy here. But I guess where you are, it's warm and sunny, and you guys want some of the rains from here.
I was just going to say, भाई थोड़ा यहाँ भेज दो. Most of my guests, Nishad, as you can imagine, are based in Mumbai. And the moment they start talking about rain, I'm like, we had some about 10 days ago, but not since then. But look, man, I'm really looking forward to this talk. We are talking about 20 years आज जुलाई 13 दोस्तों जो हमारे साथ शो पे अभी जुड़े हैं 20 years of India's famous NatWest final win at Lords under Sourav Ganguly. Show के बीच में Nishad and I are going to talk about all the central players. We're going to try and set the stage for you. But I have to ask Nishad, 20 years ago, where were you when this match was happening?
So at the time, interestingly, so I was in India for summer vacations because I had grown up in Dubai. So me and my family, we had come down for summer vacations, and 13th of July, I remember we had a religious function home, and then the next day, early morning, we were taking the early morning flight or the train to our hometown. So this was in Mumbai, and the whole family got together, and I remember Nick Knight, Marcus Trescothick getting off to a good start, and so it was pretty much in our ancestral home in Mumbai where the whole family had collected. And I actually would give a shout out to my dad because my uncle and I wanted to change the channel at 1:46 for 5, but my dad actually defied his elder brother and said that we are not changing the channel today because India is going to win. And I still don't know what made him do that, what made him say that.
Fantastic. In fact, that was going to be my next question to you. Did you put off the TV when Sachin got out? I was not. I was in the US. It was second year college. Actually, it was a summer break, and unlike most of the desis, I did not fly home to India. I stayed back with two friends to do some summer courses so I could graduate faster and to earn a bit of cash. We were watching it on my clunky desktop, a Celeron processor on Willow TV. Probably lakhs of people in India put the TV off. मैंने वो browser बंद किया और मैंने desktop का monitor off किया. I went to get lunch because of the time difference. It was time for a late lunch. But something said, I didn't have any uncle or father to back me. But something said, yeah, just go back there. So I think I came back in about 7 overs. And then I'm very glad I did because what followed uske baad, Yuvraj, Kaf, the nerves. Before Nishad, we get into the match. Um, Help me set the stage. I know you have a very keen interest in that summer of 2002. अगर हम and I've got some stats here just for our viewers. And by the way, a lot of viewers are saying welcome to you and good to have you on
Thank
the
you,
show.
everyone.
Thank you all for your support. I'll put some polls up for our viewers very soon. But Nishad, मैं देख रहा था and I want to and I believe every good story needs to be set up, which is why I also have you on the show. 98 से लेकर the end of 2001, India had reached 18 multi-team tournaments.
Yes.
जिनमें से, and I know you have the answer, only 6 were won. This was problematic as well as indicative of how consistent that one-day team was. But Nishad, winning titles बहुत मुश्किल था. In 2002 itself, nine tournament finals. Sorry, in the of the last 9 tournament finals, India had not won one. But
Yeah.
there was something extra about this team because they had drawn with England at home. Flintoff took off his shirt, which was a precursor to what Ganguly would did. हम वहाँ पे आएंगे. They beat Zimbabwe and then they won the West Indies. So did you get the sense that this team में कुछ अलग बात थी? I did.
इवन आई डिड बिकॉज क्योंकि अगर आप पहले मैच की ओर देखो आपको ये नेटवेस्ट सीरीज फाइनल जो सीरीज है आपको पूरी तरह देखना है कि भारत ने कैसे
Yes.
वहां पे प्रदर्शन किया था. यू लुक एट द फर्स्ट गेम एट लॉर्ड्स. And I was looking at the scoreboard again yesterday when I was preparing for the show, and India started off very well. It was like a dress rehearsal to the final. We didn't know at the time. The target was lesser. It was 270 odd, and India were like they were 109 for no loss. Then suddenly Sehwag gone, Dinesh Mongia gone, Sachin gone. And then Ganguly got out to an absolute screamer of a catch, and it was James
Yep.
Kirtley. Not sure if people may remember him, but James Kirtley took
What a
that
catch,
screamer of a
man.
catch. Yeah, what a catch! And then 130 to go, 4 wickets down. Having seen Indian cricket, you would have believed that this team is gone. But just the way Yuvraj and Rahul Dravid kept working the strike around, and it just looked like, hang on, there's something different about this team. And then they started dominating Sri Lanka. श्रीलंका वो टीम थी जिन्होंने भारत को बहुत हराया था पिछले 2-3 सालों में. 2000 में वो जयसूर्या ने 189 मारा था शारजा में. आई ग्रू अप इन दुबई, सो आई नेवर फॉरगेट दैट. And Jayasuriya of the 90s still gives me nightmares. I don't want to remember. Murli had taken 7 wickets. In
Oh, yeah.
2001, when India went to Sri Lanka, they lost the final. They dominated Sri Lanka in that series. So it looked like there was something different about this team that they could go on to potentially win this tournament. But then you come to the final, it's a different day. I mean, generally nothing counts, and then England get on to 325, and for a moment you're like, hang on,
Oh,
it's the
yes.
same
Oh,
thing all
yes.
over again.
Absolutely accurate points. And this is also that time where um, a year and a half or so on from the match fixing scandal, Ganguly had captained to some degree of success, but he was still trying to figure out how best to shape this, the trajectory of this team. It was very much the Sachin era. He was the starting point and the ending point of the Indian team. But like you said, there was a Rahul Dravid who'd come to terms with one day cricket 3 years before in England during the 1999 World Cup. Then there was this lovely mix, Nishad, and our viewers would also know this. Zahir was making a name. Yuvraj was making a name. Kaf had been around, Kaf had gotten the start earlier, faded away. He came back. Then you had your middle of the path Dinesh Mongias. You had Agarkar. You had Partha Patel was around. You had someone like a Kumble who'd been this colossal figure for the better part of a decade on the global stage. Not the Kumble which we said he's gonna go off the grid. He had 2 more World Cups left to play, but it was in a sense this fantastic mix. But अगर मैं खुद की बात करूं, this 21 year old guy in college, फिर भी यार सचिन आउट हो गया ना, तो ये मैच गया था. बट दिस मैच इन अ वे इन द फाइनल इट बक द ट्रेंड बिकॉज यू हैड टू यंगस्टर्स सेइंग व्हाट, आज जो भी होगा हम करके दिखाएंगे.
एग्जैक्टली exactly, और ये वही दो यंगस्टर्स हैं जो अंडर 19 वर्ल्ड कप जीत चुके थे 2000 में. कैप वाज
एग्जैक्टली.
कैप्टन, युवराज वाज प्लेयर ऑफ द
यस.
टूर्नामेंट. और वो एंड यू मस्ट आल्सो रिमेंबर हाउ दे बर्स्ट ऑन टू द सीन, बिकॉज कैप को 2 महीनों में टेस्ट डेब्यू दिया था. इट टुक हिम टाइम टू एस्टैब्लिश हिमसेल्फ एंड ही केम बैक
एग्जैक्टली.
टू द वनडे साइड. बट युवराज started off with that fantastic 80 odd against Australia and showed flashes of brilliance. But I think it's very important. I'll tell the viewers that if you get a chance, you must read John Wright's book, The Indian Summers,
Ah,
where
yes.
he talks about that phase. And and while going through it, I found a couple of interesting points that the 3-3 series against England that had happened at home, it had actually hurt the Indian team a lot, particularly John Wright. And then they decided that there were a few things that had to change. And it started with the series against Zimbabwe. In that series against Zimbabwe, Yuvraj was brought back, I think, in the fourth game at Hyderabad, and he and Kev finished the game. Where
Yep.
it again looked like Zimbabwe were winning. He and Kev finished that game. Now, when they go to West Indies, they had a few tough calls to make. Now, you've got Dinesh Mongia, who's done well. You've got Yuvraj, Kev, Tendulkar at the top, Sehwag, who's blazing. You've got Ganguly. How do you deal with this? And they wanted to milk the middle overs. तो यहाँ पे उन्होंने क्या किया कि तेंदुलकर को नंबर 4 पे रखा. राहुल द्रविड़ को बोला कि हम अभी अजय रात्रा को नहीं खिलाएंगे, आप कीपिंग कर लीजिए ताकि एक एक्स्ट्रा बैटर खिला सके. और इसके साथ जो है, जो रियल जो एक स्ट्रेंथ जो इंडियन वनडे टीम ने दिखानी शुरू की, वो वेस्ट इंडीज से शुरू हुआ था.
And exactly just like all those years ago, India's bilateral tour of the West Indies was in a sense a precursor for what would happen in the 83 World Cup a few months ago. You very
Hmm.
accurately point to that series because I think the first एक या दो मैच शायद वॉश आउट हो चुके थे. It was
दो
a
गेम
5 match
जमैका में.
series.
यस.
हाँ, दो. And In that they had Mongia was batting at number three. I think he got a couple 60s or 70s. So him
Yep.
getting runs there gave him the confidence. Acha chalo, koi hai, because it was a team in flux. You rightly said Dravid had to take over the gloves. I think he does not get the credit he deserves for doing that stopgap job pretty blooming well. So there were certain pieces, Nishad and our viewers, which were just waiting to be linked. How much of it do you give credit to Ganguly? I think a lot of the myth of Ganguly, also because, yes, he did well, but he had some fantastic players. But to figure out as a man reader, as a personnel reader, कि किसको कहाँ पे खिलाना है, do you think the Ganguly legacy actually started in that summer of 2002?
Yes, I think so because until then, now a lot of people talk about 2001, but sometimes 2001 again at home sometimes can be put aside as and said that what if it's a fluke, but that team had a lot to prove. I know sometimes it's not, it's definitely not a fluke when you win following on, but then the team had to be consistent.
Correct.
Now they had lost in Zimbabwe, they had lost in Sri Lanka, the home series against England was not good, South Africa series also in a sense was forgettable because of a lot of off-field incidents as well. But
Yes.
where the team that promised excellence came together was here, and that is where you could recognize that India had this mix of youth and experience. कि यहाँ पे आपके पास कुंबले, द्रविड़, तेंदुलकर, गांगुली और ये इनका कोर बन गया था, एंड देन देयर वर यंगस्टर्स विद अ लॉट ऑफ
Yep.
प्रॉमिस, जहीर खान, आशीष नेहरा, सहवाग, हरभजन सिंह, and also getting them to play at the right times, as you said, that is, I think, extremely critical because Sehwag was happy in the middle order. In fact, it was their idea to push him to
Yes.
the top. But Vanna, we don't know what we would have seen of Virender Sehwag, in although he may still contest that, he would have done better in the middle order in test. But yes, Sourav Ganguly legacy वहां से शुरू होती है, and the enduring image, whether he likes it or not, would be what he did at Lords that day. It
We'll
was a
come there. We'll
statement.
come there.
We'll come there,
We'll
yeah.
come there. And I'll tell our viewers, the two of us aren't going to take off our shirts.
No, no, no,
Nishad
not
is
at
at least wearing blue. I'm wearing black. Different story. I'm just going to put up a poll for our viewers here,
yes, yes.
Nishad. First question: is NatWest Trophy win Sourav Ganguly's best? This is for our viewers. Until the viewers on their lock screens cast their votes. Um, I agree with you that 2002, because that tour was not just about ODI. उसके बाद एक बहुत बड़ा important test series था,
Hmm.
which we'll also talk about, which India drew. Very few had given them that chance. So in a sense, the summer of 2002, this was the time when Michael Vaughan was, he was challenging Ricky Ponting to be the best, let's say non-Indian batsman at that time, because it was after all such an era. You had Dravid. So I remember, I think they played Sri Lanka before. There was that Russell Arnold woodworm bat thing, but Vaughan was scoring runs for fun against visiting teams. So he was not a force to be reckoned with in the one-day team, but there was the fact कि यार इस नेटवेस्ट के बाद हमें 4 टेस्ट मैचेस जाके खेलना है, वो भी माइकल वॉन की टीम के अगेंस्ट. यहाँ पे पोल के मुताबिक आ चुके हैं 100% लोग कह रहे हैं बिल्कुल नेटवेस्ट ट्रॉफी विन वाज सौरव गांगुली बेस्ट. सो it was, as much as we're here talking about what happened on July 13th, the culmination of a 2-week tournament, there was the looming 4 test match series. And at that time, tests did get a lot more importance than one day. Do you think, while Yuvraj and Kaf were not part of that test team, the players that fed off the good energy, the good vibes of that series took a lot of confidence into the 4 test matches ahead as well?
Yes, absolutely. And they took a lot of confidence and they took a lot of character moving ahead into the test series. And in fact, funnily, Mohammad Kaif was asked to stay back with the test squad, but he was an unofficial part of the test squad because there were a lot of tour games. And if say a senior batter wanted rest, then they used to play Kaif for those county games. So Kaif and Mongia were actually asked to stay back for that, just for that purpose, but they were not considered for the test matches. And test matches exactly were really critical because India had last time won a series in 86, 71 में तो पहली बार जीते थे, और 2002,
Correct.
now it was coming to a point where, even if you look at India as a country, वहां पर अभी एक अलग कॉन्फिडेंस था कि you as a nation could stand. This was post liberalization India. So even on the cricket field, the
Yes.
public demanded that you show that kind of strength. England, earlier Sri Lanka, and of course, Zimbabwe were missed opportunities. But in England, considering that you've had two feisty captains with NatWest series, the hopes just came up. That this team may have something, at least the character. And everyone talks about
Yep.
the win, like at Headingley, but I think there was a drawn game at Nottingham, which also showed a lot of character of the
Absolutely.
Indian team because they batted for 1.5 day. We talk a lot about Sydney and everything, but 1.5 day of
Yep.
pure exhibition of classy batting we got to watch.
And Nishad, that word you used, character, that in a sense was the underlying impact of what that Indian team did. Speaking of character and speaking of one of the key players, the England captain Nasser Hussain, there were some comments made about Mohammad Kaif also, which I'm sure gave him a little bit of extra dose. ये वो time था, there was no social media, people didn't have the banter, no IPL. So statements made, especially from one country to the other, you know what I'm talking about, they sort of left a bit of a different resonance back then, no?
Oh yeah, it just left a different resonance, and that is where the whole team sort of even backed Kev. When that happened, and
Yeah.
everyone knows about it. I think it's been mentioned everywhere. But also the other thing, I mean, we talk about Ganguly, taking his shirt off, but the England captain also had done something that day, which is
Correct.
not
The three
spoken of
finger
a lot.
salute.
The three
Yes, go
fingers
on, go on, go on.
the 3 finger salute to the press box because they were saying that Hussein shouldn't be batting at three. He bats
Yeah.
like 50 balls, gets 30, and that just stalls the
Correct.
innings. So, but then he
Correct.
gets that 100, and he just goes on. He just goes on. Like, and if he, you know, he just let loose like a little bit of what Ganguly had done later. So that didn't make the headlines as much as it should have.
Exactly. And also at Lords, this stiff upper lip, old fashioned home of cricket for him to do
Mm,
that at that time it seemed like yaar, I remember like yaar ye banda isko sack kar denge, but 3 hours
yeah.
later we had Ganguly taking off his shirt. We'll come to the shirt thing, but let's get into the final. Nasser Hussain, under fire captain, scores a fantastic 100. Trescotty gets 100. I think Nick Knight, you said, got out early. They have this double century partnership which comes to 325. यार उस जमाने में व्यूअर्स जो शायद हमारे मिलेनियल व्यूअर्स हैं भाई, उस टाइम पे ओवरसीज ये बहुत बड़ा टारगेट था. इट्स इंग्लैंड at Lords. There was not a lot going. Yes, we had a lot of depth. Do you remember what your thing was like at the halftime? कि ये होगा? Were you brimming with confidence? Because I was like, अच्छा है, सहवाग है, गांगुली है, सचिन है, पर यार 326 का टारगेट वो भी लॉर्ड्स पे मुश्किल है.
मुश्किल है और तभी ये भी लगा यार ट्रेस्कॉथिक ने फिर से रन मार दिया बिकॉज दैट ईयर
हाय
ट्रेस्कॉथिक वाज
हाय हाय.
स्कोरिंग अ लॉट ऑफ रन्स अगेंस्ट इंडिया इनफैक्ट he was player of the tournament in the NatWest series again nobody would remember that but phenomenal player I used to really rate him
Correct.
really highly but
Yep.
I still remember I think when they were walking out and one of my friends had come home and we used to really watch a lot of cricket so then I think when Sehwag, Ganguly, they started off well. That is when it started feeling okay. There could be something that we are seeing, and especially Ganguly making room and targeting the short boundaries on the
Yes.
offside. I think
Yep.
when he sped away, that is when the hope started brimming. And at the halfway mark, it was like gosh, it's all, it's gone again. But I'm not entirely sure if my memory serves me right, but I think there was
हाँ.
the broadcaster and one of the commentators. He sort of pulled off a gimmick where he took his mobile phone out and he said, "You know
अच्छा.
what? This is a call from the Indian captain, and he says that they are confident of winning." And it was all in jest. Yeah,
Correct.
and but yeah, I think when Saurabh got off to a good start and Virender Sehwag followed, that is when the hope really started brimming.
Absolutely. I'm gonna just put up another poll for our viewers here.
Yes, yes, of course.
Poll is was did the NatWest Trophy change Indian cricket? While the viewers are casting their votes, Nishad, you rightly said. I think Ganguly got 60 of 43 balls. The strike rate
Yep.
for that time for him was exceeded Sehwag. So as a captain, no better way than to lead from the front. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche that really holds true. That start because at least I expected Sehwag to go boom boom. I think Sehwag got पता नहीं 40 और कुछ किया था, but not the strike rate with which Ganguly
Yes.
batted. Getting a start you mentioned बहुत important था. But then there was that collapse. I mean, and I am bringing up the collapse because like me, a whole generation, हम बहुत कुछ देख चुके हैं 80s में 90s में. मैं बात बताऊं, I was sitting with my wife Meha during the Gabba test match and Meha was like like browsing Amazon. I'm like क्या हो रहा है? अरे जीतेंगे. I'm like कहाँ ये कॉन्फिडेंस कहाँ से आ रहा है? I've seen Jamaica in '97. I've seen many collapse, but
Yeah.
back then, मतलब I'm an eternal like pessimist when I want to be. I had given hope, like I've said, when I got Sachin getting out to Giles. मतलब ये क्या हो रहा है? What were your views at that time? You mentioned 145 for five.
Yeah, and वही लगा, like because Sachin that day he was trying to tackle Giles in a different way, क्योंकि आपको याद होगा वो इंडिया में आके वो नेगेटिव लाइन डाल रहे थे targeting his
अरे
pads in the
भाई
test matches. तो यहाँ पर
horrible.
यहाँ पर मुझे याद है सचिन ने एक स्वीप मारा था, एंड निक नाइट वाज ऑन द बाउंड्री और इट वाज रॉनी ईरानी, आई एम नॉट श्योर, बट इट spun away from him and it went for four.
Ronnie Irani, yes, yes.
Yeah, Ronnie Irani. And then I think Sachin made room again, cut one through the offside, and वो four गया था. So he was, I think, trying to do that again, force the pace, and he just
Yep.
got bored. And he just got bored. But it was not just you who switched off the television. A certain Muhammad Tarif and family in Allahabad also switched off their
Yes.
televisions, shut shop, and went and watched Devdas. Now you know who Muhammad Tarif and family are.
बिल्कुल. I forgotten about that story. Fantastic. Which Nishad brilliantly brings us into the partnership of that tournament, of that match. युवराज and कैफ. हमने बात किया कि वो कहाँ थे अपने individual careers में. But watching these two, yes, they've been batchmates for years now. But watching two physically and just different batsmen. एक lefty है, ताबड़तोड़ batsman था. That day he was hitting for fun. Then Kev took. I was like, ये जुगलबंदी, what's happening here? And of course, the more you watch, the more you're invested, then the emotions rise. But I was actually drawn in, like I had not seen two pairs perhaps since the Kumble Srinath partnership, and then
Yeah.
Azhar and Sachin at Cape Town. Matlab, I was not invested as much in a pair as I was that day. What about you?
Exactly, and what was fascinating to see was just the way they just went on with the job. I remember Yuvraj pulling a few in front of square. I think it was Ronnie Irani again, and then Kef working the strike around. And you thought that Kef will not maybe attack that much, and then he pulls, I think, Alex Tudor for six, and those sort of things happening. And I still remember when Yuvraj timed this brilliant one outside the off stump, and there was another one that went fine for four, and Harsha Bhogle said on air that, "Wait, hang on, are we on to something here?" And that's when,
Yes.
yeah, and that I will always remember those words. Are we on to something here? Because and I looked at my dad because my dad hadn't allowed us to change our television sets because I don't know, he was the one saying that
Oh,
ye
you had that too?
jeetna.
Yeah, yeah, same. My dad, same. You couldn't move.
Yeah, and I just looked at him, and my dad was like, this is happening, and what was, I still remember the 50 of the partnership or I think it was the 50 of the partnership or the 100 of the partnership which KF had just dabbed to the offside. They ran one, and there was an overthrow, but there was a fielder back, but they are still looking for a second, and that
Yes.
that proactiveness, and you could sense that this was a different India. And England were getting rattled. Gradually, you could see
Yep.
the overthrows that happened, maybe the expressions whenever the camera panned on Nasser Hussain's face, or some
Yep.
of the other other players. You could sense that there was something, that they were also getting a little bit under pressure.
Yep. I'm just while you're talking, I'm trying to see the viewers. This is one of the most engaging discussions we've had because the comments are flying. के very interesting. They're loving it. इसी बात पे to keep our viewers engaged, I'm going to put up another poll. थोड़ा tricky वाला है. Which innings did you like more for our viewers, Kaf or Yuvraj? Nishad, you talked about that pull shot of Tudor. That was going to be my next talking point, as well as that comment from Harsha Bogle. मुझे clearly याद है. I don't need to go to YouTube to watch it. आखिरी बॉल था और गांगुली एंड लक्ष्मण आर डूइंग दिस टू कैफ फ्रॉम द बाउंड्री. एक
Yeah,
ले एक
yeah.
ले and Kef, like, he didn't say chal hut, but when he hit that shot and then the cameras pan back to those guys, they were like, "Ore bhai ne maar diya." So it's moments like this when we were all younger, we were freer, we hadn't gotten this line. I think we were bigger fans. Such moments were like, oh my gosh, did Kef just tell them to go sit there? I've got this one. I remember that as much as I do all the things we've discussed. Because वो कर रहे एक ले strike में वो है. But that shot of Tudor, I mean, just you talked about, just walk us through the impact of that shot here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you looked at Kef and you felt it was someone who was more workman-like, who's going to just stay there. With Yuvraj, with all that flair and that that bravado, is going to be the one who's going to dominate.
Yep.
And maybe here was a guy who was like, what, appearances can be deceiving, and that is when he pulled that. And there was obviously a lot of Kef. Obviously, was supremely fit, so he could take those quick singles. But apart from those singles, I also remember his driving through the offside. I think that was really impeccable. Some of the drives that he played, with a lot of authority, and they sped away with, may not have been played with as much power as Yuvraj, but the timing was absolutely fantastic. So in a sense, it was also for someone like a Sourav Ganguly, in the dressing room as well, to know that these are the young guys that I've backed. But now, you see, right, sometimes when they go and they are ready to take responsibility themselves, I think that gives the leader the most satisfaction. And much as he would have been stunned, I think, he was probably the most satisfied along with John Wright in that dressing room.
Correct. And I know for a fact, that Nishad, you will know this, but I don't know how many viewers are aware. In India's very next ODI, in the Champions Trophy in Sri Lanka,
Yes,
Gaff played arguably and far better innings. India were playing Zimbabwe. They were also five down. He got 100. 111 शायद मारा था.
correct.
That was a far better innings. But उसको innings को याद नहीं करेंगे because it was just the first league match. But a clear gain. Someone like Gaff who'd been in and out. The run scored that day at Lords a few weeks, a couple months later, was turned around his career as well.
Absolutely, and in the interval, actually, Kev had played a lot of cricket between the two. He had played. He had also turned up, I think, for Leicestershire for a couple of games in the
He did,
county
yes.
championship, and because he was also with the Indian team playing those side games. Fun fact: there were England Cricket Board had hosted T20 trial games, and Kef was a part of that as well. So they had invited Kef to be a part of that along with Dinesh Mongia, and the BCCI were happy to allow them to go.
Correct.
So
Yes.
he
Yes.
had played, so his career was on the ascent at the time. And even if you look at the NatWest series in isolation, I think even the Champions Trophy that followed was like a build up. It was a build up to that, because I think we saw the
Correct.
Indian team play some phenomenal cricket there as well. It's just a pity that rain ruined the final.
It didn't happen. Yep.
And
No,
I think,
absolutely. What?
yeah.
Yeah. No, go on. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah.
No, no, exactly. And Kef in that period, and even otherwise, I think all those contributions, those nuggety knocks, even winning, say, those couple of games in Pakistan in 2004, where he had important contributions. I mean, he's not the kind of guy who batting at number seven would get 100, because if he gets 100, that means the team was in real trouble. But a lot of
Correct.
those half centuries, they came in crisis situations, and I think he doesn't get enough credit as much as he should, apart from the NatWest Series final as well.
No, you're absolutely right because CAF 2002 there's ample evidence. 2003 there's ample evidence, and in 2004 even in Pakistan first match he hadn't batted, but that tumbling catch he took when I think he collided with Bangar or someone, even that
Badani,
kind of a
Badani.
catch. No? Badani, exactly. B Badani Bangar. One of those catches. I mean, that was a catch which like it lifts the whole mood. So that is one of the impact that Mohammad Kaif had. I'm gonna put up another picture on our screen. This picture is unforgettable for so many people. Just these guys being mobbed here because there was a collapse. Um, Kumle got out. I think Zahir came out. These images. One last thing before we come to that all important Ganguly question. Just I mean, these were days when you cherish, as an Indian cricket fan, you cherish such moments. I thought like there were tears in my eyes when they all mobbed Gaff at the end. You?
Oh, it was, I mean, for me, it was a lot of disbelief that we had seen something like that. And it
Yep.
was, I mean, at the time, I was just 12. So for me, it was the greatest thing I had seen in one day cricket. I
Superb.
had heard the 99 World Cup semi final on radio, because we were in Dubai.
Ah,
There were broadcast problems, so I had only heard it on radio. This was the greatest win I had seen, and obviously there were memories of the Desert Storm and everything, but Desert Storm, India had lost and then qualified, and then Sachin just blazed away in the final. There was no chance for Australia.
one man show.
You're, yeah, you're down and out, and you come back, and after your biggest hope is gone, and I still remember Yuvraj getting out and Yuvraj literally walking back and almost in tears. It looked like, he was
Yep.
almost in tears. But then I will also not forget Harbhajan walking out and flicking a six over square leg. And the timing on that, Harbhajan could
One of
seriously
our
bat.
viewers in this comment stream, sorry to cut you, one of our viewers even mentioned Harbhajan. And I'm like, here's a viewer who remembers that match. Sorry, go on, Nishad.
And but yeah, just the way KF Yuvraj in those last two overs, I think the nerves they showed because it was just those last two wickets and KF, getting those important boundaries in the at the 2-3 overs before the last over, and then even Zahir, I think the kind of temperament he showed just to work the strike around, getting those 2 runs, and
Yep.
when I think for me when it really caught on was when Kef was just laughing and Ganguly comes and he jumps on to Mohammad Kef and the team comes in
You felt bad.
and
Arey bhai, isko mat, like, the whole
yeah,
weight of Ganguly on that guy.
yeah. It really was the greatest win I had seen until then. And when I think back to it, I just it also in a sense that that we all the whole family watched it together. Because even my grandmother never was interested in cricket. She used to like say, "आप लोग क्यों 5 दिन अपना बर्बाद करते हो?" And even when you were playing, like when I would play, she would be like, "Hey, what is this? You're spending the whole time in the sun, pura din." Because as in school cricket you used to play long overs, right? You used to play 40 over
Yeah, yeah.
games. So it's like पूरा दिन तुम धूप में खड़े रहते हो ये वो. But that was the day my grandmother watched that game. She was like, there is and I will never forget that. That's the only time I remember her intently watching the game because she felt that the whole family is doing something together, so there must be something worth watching. And those are those emotional moments that the Indian team or your favorite sports team always gives you. And
Correct.
you know, that is what the NatWest series would mean, not just for me, but a lot of people around the country. They when they look back, वही याद रहेगा कि आपने वो किसके साथ देखा था, आपके क्या फीलिंग थे तभी, how you felt even in the days after that. You felt like champions in the days after after that
बिल्कुल.
win.
Yep. Very like that's a fantastic anecdote. And जो अभी कहा तुमने end में निशाद, I have the same feeling. Like I said, I was sitting in a college dorm room in Ohio, in the middle of nowhere in America during a hot summer day, hot by their standards. But I was watching that match with two Pakistanis and a guy from Nepal, and four of us hugging and jumping after that win. The other three weren't even Indian, right? But
Yeah.
they watched a fantastic match. They wanted to watch Sachin. They said, I was the one which left to get lunch when Sachin got. So these guys, and that is what that match does, and that is what cricket does. Before we get, I'm going to bring up that famous or infamous, we can say, picture. Um, ये जो हुआ दोस्तों, अगर आपको याद है, I'll put a poll for, अगर आपको याद नहीं है, there's a backstory. The 3-3 ODI series that India, I would say, shared, not shared back in the day was the term. In the final match at the Wankhede, Andrew Flintoff had a big role to play, और Flintoff ने अपना shirt निकाला था, which obviously didn't sit well with, I mean, that was a different time. आजकल के टाइम में इतना शॉकिंग नहीं होता, पर 2002 में ये बहुत बड़ी बात थी. This was Ganguly's reply to Flintoff, to England, to Hussain, to the establishment. What was your first reaction on seeing this guy do this?
Well, it was. I mean, we couldn't believe it because just on a side note, remember the 2002 Football World Cup had just gotten over at the time. So we had
Uh-huh.
seen a lot of that on the football field. So this was like, okay, what's happening? For a moment, it was unbelievable. But there's a big backstory as well because Ganguly and Flintoff were at Lancashire together, and that
Oh
wasn't
yes.
the most happy experiences for I think
What about
anybody.
that, yeah?
Yeah. So, and if you read Andrew Flintoff's book, Ganguly and
Huh.
Flintoff was going at Ganguly through the series as well, and there was something.
With his bags and his kits and his bats, na? Lord Snooty and all.
Yeah, he was going at him. I mean, he went. I mean, I read the book, and if the I think if that book was published, say today, it would have been top tier headlines with social media around. But just that, like for example, Flintoff writes in the book that he dismissed Ganguly in the Test matches, and all his Lancashire teammates were wishing him by sending him text messages. So there was a lot of that backstory happening,
बहुत.
and then obviously Saurav and Nasser, they much as they were feisty, there was also a lot of healthy respect for Nasser Hussain in the Indian dressing room. Like
Yep.
even Sachin has appreciated Hussain for the tactics and for the way he was trying to, keep Sachin quiet and everything. Sachin has said, tactically he was one of the best captains he played against. So with that healthy respect for them, and another backstory being that John Wright and Saurav were not talking to each other before the final.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
and with all that, and then apparently VVS Lakshman was trying to stop Saurabh, but that didn't
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
as you can see. And he just went for it, and it in a sense, it was that this Indian team is no longer going to be is ready to express itself. And when you've got a leader who just looks at the establishment and says, you know what, to hell with
Exactly.
traditions, we are here to do our job. We are here to express ourselves. And I think that was very symbolic for that era. I mean, when someone like a Yuvraj KF, if I was a Yuvraj KF and I looked at my captain like that, I would have, of course, felt like, you know what, I'm being led by a lion out there.
Yep. Absolutely. They're like, you think of the captains like you can be a pusher and you can be a puller. I think like Sourav Ganguly, a man who probably did not polarize opinion unlike anybody else of those times. He could be a pusher and he could be a puller. And on his day, he could be equally brilliant, also be equally, disappointing. But just to pick up one more strand from this series. This image here, just like Kath being mauled by Ganguly, just like Ganguly taking off his shirt at the Lord's balcony, this image is also so firmly implanted in my mind. We talked about the legacy being built, Nishad. Iske baad Champions Trophy, not one final but two finals. I crossed US state borders to try and watch that final both
Hmm,
times. Chalo, deserved finalist. There was a momentum building. That
hmm,
momentum, despite that series loss in New Zealand, the end result was the 2003 World Cup. End result, क्योंकि because the team got to the final.
hmm.
Final, they got smashed. But it was a culmination of all the factors you and I have discussed over the last 40 minutes, leading up, I think, starting from this tour into 2003. Because the core team, barring one or two players, was the same, right?
Exactly. And just before we go ahead, I'd like our audience to look at this picture that Jamie has just shared. And this is a detail that I found really fascinating at the time, and it continues even today. Is Saurabh, look at the people around him. Zahir, Harbhajan, Sehwag, there's Mohammad Kef, there's Tinu Yohanan behind. And these are all the
Johan.
youngsters. Yeah, these are all the youngsters. Where are the Tendulkars, Dravids, Kumbles? They're all on the side. And Saurav would pick up the trophy as captain, hand it to them. And that tradition has continued in the Indian team. You look at that. Now, these are intangibles. You have to value this. The youngsters are made to feel welcome. Now, you look at the T20 series that India won recently, and the trophy was
Yep.
given to Umran Malik. I think it all started with the Sourav Ganguly era, where he let the youngsters do that. So I think that is where these are the
Wow.
this is the soft power of leadership, which really blends a team. And 2003 World Cup, look at it. I look at it this way: Australia was there, then there was 50 feet of everything else, and then the rest of the teams. So, Australia was, I mean, just to get the better of them, they either had to have a really bad day or their team had to be injured and completely out of it. Damian Martin walked into the final with a broken finger and scored 88. So they
Imagine.
were, yeah,
Hey, yaad mat dila yaar.
yeah. We should not, that hurts.
No,
But
but just Nishad, just hearing you talk, I think a year down the line there should be a 20 years of that World Cup as well because that
hmm,
World Cup in itself. I mean, I think we can do several shows. There was so much. I mean, India losing to that same Australia you mentioned the first match. वहां पे भी हमने कहा यार ये गया, but then to come back that way and like I said with pretty much the same players, the Sehwags, the Kefs, the Yuvrajes, the Zahirs, as well as that mix. And just on the final note, we've run out of time. We cannot get into the one-day series. You do see Nishad to an extent parallels of that now. There's a Rohit, there's a Kohli and all these youngsters. तो यही बात जो बताया था अभी इस पिक्चर में, you are seeing Indian cricket also at a very strong point now, despite the losses. The bench strength has never been as good, to my mind, than it is right now. And you see Rohit and Kohli near the end of their respective careers or getting there, blending with the Arshdeeps, the Harshals, the Umrans, the Hudas. In a sense, this is what that summer of 2002 was about as well.
exactly, and this gave them the platform back then, and it wasn't easy. You had to play the Dilip trophies, Ranjis, and it's only then you got into the Indian team. But now, having been fortunate to have worked with IPL for the last 7 years in different capacities, I think the camaraderie has been fantastic. There, I mean, Ganguly had to do a lot more in the sense of building that camaraderie. Now, when you've got an IPL game and Arshdeep Singh at the end of the game can just walk up to MS Dhoni or a Virat Kohli and say, I want to ask you about these things, and you have got a lot more access. So when these guys get into the Indian team, the welcoming thing is a lot easier than maybe it would have been then, because there you try to get to know them. Now you already know them, so it's just about settling them in. So you see that, and it's of course a lot easier, but the challenges of today's era are different. But the
Yep.
inspiration, I'm sure you ask a Virat, you ask a Rohit, their inspiration as well would have been that generation, and that is something
True.
that they would want to carry forward. The challenges today are different, but the mission is obviously, I think, it still remains the same. The T20 World Cup this year, followed by the big one next year.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely spot on. Thank you for your time. Thank you to all our
Oh, my
viewers who
pleasure.
posted so many comments. Nishad, sports anchor, sports writer, author. You've already got a book. You have one more coming out in the not too distant future. We wish you all the best for that. I've
Thank
had
you.
a total blast rewinding. On a parting note, I like to talk more about the past, nostalgia, and I think this talk we've had has been one of the best on this show since it started. So thank you so
My
much, Nishad.
pleasure. My pleasure completely. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the viewers. And yeah, it
Yes,
was great reminiscing on July 13, 2022, about 2002.
brilliant. Thank you. Be well, and all our viewers, you too. Take care. Goodbye for now, everyone.